A lot has been going on, so why don't we chat for a few minutes while I do something with this bottle of ink and a paintbrush. Well, hello there, I'm Detroit. I haven't made a video in a while, because it was Christmas and I was with my family. By the way, I don't know if I'll make this video in time before the new year, so maybe it's 2024, maybe not yet, I don't know. Anyway, Christmas is definitely over. And before Christmas, before all that, I defended my PhD thesis. And that's my first topic, of course. As you can guess from the lack of gravity I'm saying it with, my defense obviously went alright. I successfully became a doctor in condensed matter physics. This is the end of a huge arc for me. 3 years of work to finally be validated by a jury of my peers. You know what, let's go over how a PhD defense goes. You may not know what it's like, although it's very similar to any other oral presentation you can have in a school environment, or after an internship. And this might be the last time I bring it up in videos like that, so I won't bore you with it afterwards. There are a couple points that make a PhD defense seem more official. First, the members of the jury elect a president within themselves. I had 5 people in my jury. The president then introduces everybody, and then the presentation can start. 45 minutes of me talking about my work, with no interruption, an audience of researchers, people from my lab, my friends and my family. Because 45 minutes may seem like a long time, but it really isn't, I could only go over the main results and the broader ones. You can't resume 3 full years in 45 minutes, especially when some parts of the presentation are for the lab, thanking the audience, etc. You can't really avoid these parts, even though they're not really scientific. Anyway, I went over my results in a more pedagogical way. The jury in front of me had read the manuscript of my thesis anyway, so they had access to the more in-depth results. Right, so at the end of my presentation, I thanked everybody, my supervisors and the members of the jury in particular. Then the audience clapped, and then the questions began. So far, it's not right to call it a defense. To defend, you have to have some sort of an attack, and that's where the questions come in. Actually, it wasn't that bad. I was stressed during the presentation, but during the questions, I kinda forgot where I was. I simply started talking about physics with researchers that were interested. It felt alright, and after around an hour and a half of questions from all 5 members, that was it. Fun fact, one of the reviewers from the jury had sent me a series of potential questions a month before the defense, so I knew what to expect. The jury then thanked me again for my presentation, and they left the room to deliberate, right after my 3 supervisors took the time to praise me publicly and comment on how I'm a good researcher. That feels awkward at first, but I almost got emotional from this. Anyway, the question session is over and the jury leaves to take their decision. For your information, most people in the audience usually leave just before the questions. Like, it's normal. Most people that didn't work directly with me only wanted to see the presentation, like a seminar, but the questions get so precise most of the time that a lot of people don't follow the discussion, so it's kinda useless to say. Anyway, the jury took about 15 minutes to deliberate, but by this point, the decision is pretty much already decided. Since I was allowed to defend, it's a given that I was gonna succeed. What takes the most time is write the small speech the president gives when they come back. I also had to read a dumb paragraph about how I followed ethics and how I swear I'll continue to do so in my career. It's very awkward to read, but it's in the French law, I think. The president then officially declared me a doctor. Round of applause, small speech from yours truly, and then comes the good part. The cocktail with champagnes and petit four and toast, etc. I even got a couple gifts from my colleagues and fellow PhD students. Some gifts are drawing related, so you might see them in future video. And that is how a PhD defense goes, at least in France, and at least mine. It lasted a couple of hours, and it finished this arc that was my daily life for the past 3 years. This PhD gave me enough money and freedom to fuel my passion for drawing, so I'm thankful for it. I also met my girlfriend through work, so that's yet another reason why I had a great time as a PhD. And now, apart from having to legally call me Dr. Detroit, you will never hear from it again. I've already talked about it more than I thought I would, and I still haven't mentioned this drawing in the slightest. Or should it be a painting? An inking? I'm using a paintbrush, but with Indian ink instead of paint. It's an exercise I'm not very familiar with. Paintbrushes are hard to master, and I focus so much on pens that I never really got into painting. This is a test run, we can say. I'm using thick Canson paper made for watercolor because most of my notebooks have thin pages that probably can't handle large blobs of ink. For this drawing, I wanted to let my mind roam free. I traced on the paper a spiral with a pencil, which makes the shape of an ammonite. And then it's just a case of letting the ink flow and adding details. For me, who is often using technical pens or fountain pens that have a rather limited range of line thickness, with the brush, it's the changes in thickness that make the drawing live. It's more dynamic. It's a very fun process. I mean, it's always fun to draw for me, but switching tools always gives new interesting opportunities. You should do that if you're in a slump or if you're uninspired. Change the tools you use and go along with it. Don't get me wrong, I would love to master the paintbrush as soon as possible, but in the meantime, it's also nice to follow the flow of the ink that is unstable, imprecise, and so on. The brushes I'm using are from a cheap pack I found in an art store. They are paintbrushes and not actually designed for ink, but with my level, I assume it wouldn't make much difference. The ink is also a generic brand, nothing too fancy. It's a bottle of China ink, which I just realized in English is actually called Indian ink. I don't know why the name is different in French. There are some words like that are localized but change depending on the language. It's like French fries, which in France we call simply fries, but actually come from Belgium, I think. Same for guinea pig. In French, the quote-unquote pig doesn't come from Guinea, but India. Indian pig is what we call the rodent. And by the way, why is it called a pig? Doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, this ammonite I drew looks quite nice, I think. It's very fun drawing with ink. The imprecise lines add a lot to the design, with the eyes popping here and there. It's a cool monster that's been in the sea for times immemorial. It's a good way to get back into the flow of things after the holidays. And that will be all for today. I still don't know if I should wish you a happy new year or not. Have a good time and I'll see you next week. Subscribe, like the video and tell me in the comments if you've ever used a paintbrush and how it felt the first time. Dr. Detroit signing out. Bye!